Hi everyone, it's Alex here again. Welcome to my Handstand mini series. Today we are kicking it off with part 1, in which I'm going to break down the fundamentals of hand balancing so you can understand the physics of hand balancing and all the different muscles and parts and bits of it that you need to be aware of. I'm also going to give you some warm-up exercises, and then I'm going to give you 3 exercises, 1 balance exercise and 2 strength exercises to get started on your handstand journey.
And if you're wondering about what we're going to learn in the other parts.
In number 2, we are going to learn a bit more about balancing. And in part 3, I'm going to teach you how to do a scorpion handstand. I actually don't know how to pronounce that. For today, let's just stick to part 1 and we're going to kick it off with fundamentals. We're going to start with understanding what is actually happening in a handstand and comparing it to standing upright, because actually standing up, our feet do exactly the kind of job that our hands are going to have to learn to do in a handstand. So here you can see a video of me, I'm standing up, and I encourage you to actually stand up and feel this yourself. We're going to stand a little bit of space between our feet, and we're going to find a comfortable, well-balanced spot for us and try to feel where the pressure of the floor is. And it is, I can already tell you, it is going to be distributed pretty evenly across your whole foot. And this is what we need to learn in a handstand as well. But to do this, actually, to stand in this position, something we don't really usually think about, our calves need to be doing a lot of work. So to do this in a handstand, our hands will have to do a lot of work. There's of course the other way to balance as well, is if you lean into your heels, your calves don't have to work that much anymore, but balance-wise, this is much harder. And there is this way that you can learn to balance in a handstand, balancing more on the palm of your hand, but this is much more advanced balancing. So we want to start with the part where we push our fingers into the ground and we really work on bringing on some tension from our forearms to hold our handstands. And to do this, we need to think about that now our shoulders in a handstand, they're going to be replacing the function of our hips. So you want to make sure that when you do a handstand, we want to be using our fingers quite a lot, gripping with our fingertips onto the floor, just like our toes do. And then we're going to lean forward so our shoulders are over the middle of our hand, just like our hips are over the middle of our feet when we stand up. This is what is going to allow us to balance in here. So now, as we know that we need to keep control in our hands, the other important thing is that we need to keep our bodies firm. They don't need to be straight, but they need to be firm. And I wanted to demonstrate it with a stick, but I don't have a stick, so I have a mop. So if this mop is nice and firm, I place it on my hand, and it is going to be quite easy for me to try to balance this here. Okay, I have not practiced for this performance, but you get what I mean. But now if this mop comes alive and it does its own thing and is wiggling back and forth, it's going to be absolutely impossible for me to try to balance it, because I cannot have any control over something that is doing its own little jam. And it is the same thing in a handstand. And it is very difficult to get rid of that wiggling in the handstand, and it is because it comes from a balance reflex. It actually doesn't come from lack of core strength. Contrary to popular teaching, they teach you that you need to do a lot of core work and squeeze your glutes and squeeze your thighs. But actually, if you can already stand upright, just like I do now, you already have enough core strength and glute strengthening to do a handstand. You just have to practice a lot to gain control over that balance reflex. So now, as we got the 2 important points down, we need to be working with our hands and we need to try to gain control over our balance reflex. The third thing is that, again, perhaps contrary to what you have seen, a lot of places teach you a straight handstand first. And again, I have a very good example. I've been really working on this. If you stand on a balance beam, right, something that's really narrow, and I only had a mat here, so this is not exactly a perfect example, but you open your arms to the side straight away. And that is because distributing your weight across a bigger area is going to make it easier for you to balance. And it is exactly the same in a handstand. So if you try to balance in a handstand and you have everything together and you're in a perfect tight little line, it is going to be hard as to balance. So this is why actually having your legs open in a little stag or legs open in a little A shape or a little mini split is going to make it much easier to keep your balance there, for exactly the same reason as it is easier to stand with your arms to the sides when you are on a balance beam or a tightrope. So with this, I'm just saying that if you're practicing and you find it easier to do it with stag legs or split legs, A legs like this, then you don't have to be learning a straight handstand as your first handstand. And there's also, of course, the other side of it where some people do find it easier to just keep their legs together because they have one less thing to think about. So after mopping the floors and talking a whole river, let's just jump into those warm-up exercises. As a rule of thumb, I would do at least either 30 reps or 30 seconds of each of these, and ideally until you feel like you're sort of ready and nice and warm in your wrists. So we're just gonna start on all fours, nice and wide with our hands, fingers open as wide as we can, and from here we're just gonna start with gentle circles. So just little circles. I will do 30 times one way, 30 times the other way. The next one we're gonna be doing, we're gonna be activating the muscles in our palms. So from here, I'm gonna be pushing my fingers into the ground to lift my palm up. And it is really important that we don't push like this with flat fingers. I wanna make sure that I'm bending my fingers, lifting up. And you should feel it under your hand, and you're also gonna feel it in your forearm. Once we're done with this, 30 of each, we're gonna come up to our feet, and from here we're gonna repeat again. We're gonna go circles, nice and small, and making them bigger and bigger as you feel warm. If you're very tight in your shoulders, you wanna make sure that you do some downward dogs as well, just to get a nice shoulder stretch. Don't have to do 30 of them, but maybe 10. And then the last thing we're gonna do, we're gonna practice a little bit more of like leaning into our hands, which is a very big part of handstanding. So on our feet, I'm gonna push my fingers into the ground, making sure I have very good grip here. And I'm essentially doing this again, this, right? And from here, I'm gonna push my shoulders over the middle of my hand, pushing all the way through my shoulders. I'm using my traps. And then I would just hold here 30 seconds, doing a few rounds of these. I really also like to just do some hand circles in between my handstands and in my warm-up. I just feel like that kind of relaxes my hands a little bit. So these are the little warm-up exercises, and always please make sure that you do them. Even if you're just going to do one odd handstand, it is very easy to get injured. And for the first balance exercise, we are going to need a bench or a couch or a bed, anything of about this height, and ideally something soft, so ideally not a bench. And from here, we're gonna start with placing our knees on our bench. And this is just going to help us practice being upside down, especially for those that are afraid of just jumping straight into a handstand. And we're gonna be working technique. So making sure that our shoulders go over our wrists. So here we are. And I mean, again, like if you're not very flexible, this can be pretty tough. So you wanna make sure that the bench is wide so you can open your legs a little bit. It makes it easier. Shoulder width apart, nice and open fingers, making sure we push our fingertips into the ground. And from here, I'm going to push all the way through my shoulders, and I'm gonna lean my shoulders over my hand. And at the beginning, before you build up strength, it's gonna feel a little bit scary. So just leaning, activating, using your muscles. If you start feeling, okay, this feels really good for me, you can be coming up. The closer you bring your knees to your chest, the harder this is. And just practicing holding here. If you do this exercise and you find like, okay, I feel really comfortable with this, you can attempt to balance from here. So again, all the same steps, but this time we're gonna come up and we're going to try to lean, opening your legs to the sides and trying to take off that back foot. And It really makes it easier to think about opening the legs wide, because if you keep your legs to your chest, you're gonna have to lean very far forwards, and that is very, very hard. So again, I know this is a bit tough, like you need a certain level of flexibility for this exercise. And if you don't have that, just make sure your bench is wide so you can open your legs a little bit wider. And for our first conditioning strength exercise, we're going to do simple handstand holds against the wall. So hands quite a bit away from the wall. Here, you're going to start with walking your feet up the wall. So tiny little walks, if this is where you feel comfortable. And of course, if you fall, you're just gonna fall into the middle here. So you don't wanna be so close to the wall that if you fall, you're gonna fall on your head. Here, and technique bits, making sure we push all the way through our shoulders. And if you feel comfortable here, we're gonna be leaning your shoulders over your hands, holding 30 seconds, then 60 seconds, and longer if you can. The second exercise, again against the wall, we're going to do some shrugs. So same thing, coming up. And from here, we're gonna be pushing through and relaxing. And doing 20 of these, 30, 60, however many you can. If you feel like all the handstands against the wall are way too much upside down for you and you just feel dizzy, but you still want to practice your strength, we're going to do a plank or a front support in gymnastics. Plank as you know it, but we're going to point our toes. And from here, I'm going to wiggle my toes forward so I can lean my shoulders over my wrists, pushing all the way through, keeping our core super, super tight. Just doing holds here again, same as against the wall, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. If you start feeling that this is getting easy, you could use a little bit more. If you are in the gym, you can be placing some weight plates on your back. This is us for today. And before I let you go, I just want to remind you of one thing, and that is please to take care of your wrists when practicing your handstands. It is very easy to get injured, and there's actually no shortcuts in this. You need to be working consistently, and you need time to build up strength and resistance to all the weight that you're going to be putting on your hands. So don't rush it, because if you get injured, you're going to be out for ages. Speaking from experience. If this was useful to you, please give me a like. I really appreciate that. Leave me a comment if you're working on your handstands, and stay tuned for part 2 and 3 that I will release next week, and then again the week after. See you next time.